All right, welcome back everyone. So today we'll go ahead and give you an overview of the final project, and then we'll get right into what you'll need for your first milestone project. So click go. Again, this final project is divided into 3 milestones. So each of these milestones, you're going to be working on a portion of your overall final project. So this first section, this first milestone that you'll be completing, you're going to be graded on basically two things. You're going to be graded on the title and introduction. So that's one segment of your milestone grade. And then the second segment is the method section. Okay, so you're basically beginning your final project, your first part of your final project. In week 4, we are going to conduct a data analysis so that you'll get some practice analyzing a big chunk of data, and then we're going to take that information along with some other data that we've already compiled and create a results section in week 6. This results section is going to include all of the data basically in a visual format that we can then analyze. So that's the discussion section. And then finally we will end with the reference list, so a full reference list that you will have used in all 3 milestones. And then you're going to get feedback on each one of these milestones. So when I give you that feedback, it's going to be pretty extensive. So I'd like you to carefully read through the feedback and then make adjustments to your writing. Okay, so perhaps you didn't go into enough detail of something. So I, give you direction on what to include and so forth. So you're going to include all of this feedback that you've received from your 3 milestones and put everything together in a final paper. So this final paper is your final project, and that is due at the end of week 7. Okay, so try to, even though the first 3 milestones are kind of like rough drafts of your final project, try to make it as complete as possible, do excellent jobs on these 3 milestones so that hopefully you'll get a 400 out of 400 on your final project. Okay, so that's the goal here. All right, so let's take a look at our information here. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and go to our Brightspace page. Let's see. Okay, so I'm in Module 2 right now. And in Module 2, you're going to basically have all the resources that you're going to need to complete this first Milestone 1. But before we get into that Milestone 1, I'm going to go ahead and just give you an overview of what this final project is all about. And then that way, it'll be easier for you to put this first part together. So I downloaded that final project's guideline. It looks like this. Okay, so you'll want to read through this this prompt down here very carefully. Okay, so this prompt gives you an idea of what this whole project is about, and then what you're going to be including and so forth. So read through this final project guidelines, and then you'll also want to read through the Milestone 1 guidelines, which are basically just kind of a summary. The rubric is not very useful in my opinion, so I'll walk you through what you should include in your introduction and your method section of your milestone. So again, this Milestone 1, you're graded on 2 elements: the introduction, which includes the title, and the method section. Okay, so let's take a look. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint slide, and let's take a look. Why did it do that? Swap at what this whole project is about. So this is basically a study on birds. What we are trying to achieve is we're pretending like we have been charged with as a consultant to some sort of nonprofit environmental group. Okay, so this particular environmental group is an international bird conservation organization. So Their goal is to basically preserve as many bird species as possible, since bird populations are declining all around the world. And their focus is on the country of Belize. So Belize is in Central America. There's a lot of lush rainforests and different ecosystems in this particular, or different habitats in this particular country. And so within this country, the International Bird Conservation Organization has identified 4 potential locations where they can set up a sanctuary. So as some sort of nature preserve to preserve as many of these bird species as possible. So your goal in this project is to try to figure out which one of these 4 sites is the best for this preservation. Okay, so which one should get funded to be built into a nature conservancy or something to preserve the bird species. So the way that we're going to be acquiring this information is us, you, me, our, consulting firm that we belong to, again, this is hypothetical, are going to go into Belize and we're going to visit these 4 sites. And we're going to collect data. So there's basically 2 types of data that we're going to be collecting at these 4 sites. So the first one is we're going to be looking at what type of birds are found there and how many birds of each species are found there. So basically we're looking at the types of birds and the abundance of the birds found at each of the 4 sites. We're also going to collect data on the different plant communities within each site. Okay, so that way it'll give us an idea of the ecosystem and how stable the area is. So of course, we've already collected the data for you, but we're pretending you've gone out there and you and your team have already collected the data. So now that we have that data, we're going to figure out, based on our analysis of that data, which of the specific sites we should purchase, okay? And I should note that the data that we've collected on the sites are the actual parcels that are up for purchase, okay? We're gonna choose one of the 4, as well as the surrounding area around each parcel. Because, we don't wanna just save an area that's surrounded by construction or something like that. So we want to also take a look at the regional setting along with that specific parcel site. Okay, and then once we've done our analysis, that'll allow us, you, me, our organization, our consulting firm, to make a formal recommendation. Which of the 4 sites we think should be preserved. Okay, so let's take a closer look at where we are located. So here we see basically a map of Central America, and we're going to focus in on the country of Belize. So here's Belize, way up here. You can see just a little bit of geography here where Belize is located in the Central American region. So you can see that the northern border borders Mexico. Okay, its western border is Guatemala, and then the eastern border is basically the Caribbean Sea, the Gulf of Mexico. And then also kind of look at the latitude here. So if we look at the latitude, we are at about, it's going to be above 15 degrees north latitude. So the equator is, down here. But we're pretty close to the equator, okay? So Belize is, fairly close to the equator. And because it's, close to the equator, just the seasons are, pretty similar. There's not as much change. And so you end up with this very lush area. So you can just see from the satellite view of this, this country of Belize, it's filled with forests, okay? Tropical rainforest. It's a lush vegetated state, okay, or country, I should say. So perfect for a wide variety of bird species. And then this map is a map that you actually have access to in your and basically, let me show you where it is in case you want to use it in your paper. It is in the final project guidelines. You can see there's a click on the map, and then you can actually use that map if you want. So this is in our final project guidelines and rubrics. So you can use this, you can include it in your paper if you want. You don't need to, but it's there for you. Okay. I'm just going to keep it open like that because it'll switch otherwise. So this map you have available. Actually, it's kind of bothering me, so I will swap. And here, this map I like to use because it has the 4 sites. Okay, so you can see we have a total of 4 sites that we are gathering data in. First one is in Gallon Jug. So that's kind of in the northwestern part of Belize. We have Belmopan, kind of in the middle. Coxcomb Basin, which is, you know, pretty close to the Gulf of Mexico there, and then Punta Gorta in the south. Now, one thing I like about this map is it's an elevation range. So you can see that just based on this information from this map, you can kind of interpret a lot about the site. So, you know, Gallon Jug, you can see it's right along a river, but it's pretty low in elevation compared to, you know, some of, you know, Belmopan and Coxcomb that are kind of close to this mountain range and so forth. Okay, you can kind of see where they're located in reference to saltwater, okay, the Gulf of Mexico, if there's rivers, things like that that are close by. So all of that you want to consider when you're making your final decision, okay, because just based on what you'll learn in ecology, kind of gauge what would be the best area for a nature preserve. All right, so let's get into the information. So I already pointed out that the assignment guidelines and rubric folder includes that final project guidelines and rubrics. So you'll definitely want that available. Additionally, you'll want to look at the milestone 1 guidelines and rubric, the bird data, diversity indices, vegetation analysis, and the McKinnon data instructions. So those are all things that you're going to be using throughout this project. Okay, so let me go ahead and, you know, show you also what else is included. So a lot of this is just found in the assignment guidelines and rubric folder, which is in that start here folder. So let me go ahead and open that up. Okay, why aren't you going out there? Okay, so here is our, so that would be located in the start here folder. Everything else, I mean, you'll find within the milestones. Okay, so as far as what you'll need for this particular assignment, as I stated before, we have already collected the data for you, but we're pretending like, you know, you actually collected, you and your team. So the bird data is basically just what we have collected of the 2 methods that we're using for bird data collection, which you'll learn about. We have 2 sets of data. One is what we call the point count data, and then the other is called the McKinnon data. So both of these methods have pros and cons, and they basically gather 2 different types of data. So the point count method, I'll just show you, this is the data from the Belmopan site. And what it does is basically at this particular data, we list all of the different species of birds that were identified, as well as the total number of individuals of each species. So the American redstart, a type of bird, the ornithologist, or you, or you know, whoever on your team is collecting the data, counted 23 individuals in Belmopan. Okay, Gallon Jug might have a different number. So there were only 8 counted of the American redstart. Okay, so these are just the totals of the different species of birds, as well as the total number of each species. The other type of data is a little different. This is the McKinnon data. And in the McKinnon data, what they are trying to figure out is they're doing a different survey method. So instead of looking at the total abundance of each species, like in the point count data, we're looking at basically the total number of species that are found, as well as how common each species is. Okay, so I'll go over that information in a little bit. So right now, this data is not going to mean much to you because in milestone 2, we're actually going to analyze this data. So we're going to analyze all of the Mechanic data for each of the sites. Okay, the regular data we've analyzed for you already. So SNHU, okay, basically took the data from Belmopan and Gallon Jug and Coxcomb and Punta Gorda for the point count data and placed it through a statistical analysis program called PAST. And this particular program helps us calculate different diversity indices. So you can learn about this particular program if you want. So you can just click on the link. This is the diversity indices data. And this is the outcome of that. So basically they took all of that information from the Excel spreadsheet, uploaded it into this PAST program, and we got the results. So we have like the number of species, so there's 240 species in Punta Gorda versus 97 in Belmopan. The total number of individuals, so that's just the number of birds found. The dominance index, which is a specific type of diversity index. The Shannon-Weiner, or that's another type of species diversity index, and then the equitability index, the J index, that is a different type. So we basically looked at different species diversity. Okay, and we'll learn more about how to analyze this, particularly in milestone 3. Okay, so that's something that you might want to reference in your paper this time. Just how we do everything. Okay, if I go back to our milestone. We have the vegetation analysis. We just went over the diversity indices, by the way. And then we have the vegetation analysis. So I'll show you what that looks like. So this is basically a bunch of pie charts showing the regional as well as the specific parcel data for each of our 4 sites based on what vegetation is found. So you can see that these pie charts, you kind of have to zoom in to look at it more closely. But we have regional data for each of the sites. That's the area surrounding the parcel. And then we have the actual parcel data. So these are the actual parcels that could be purchased for the conservation group. And you can kind of see how diverse they are with regards to vegetation. All right. All right, so that's basically some of the information that you'll want to access in putting together this milestone. The other thing that you'll want to access is this article. So this Odea Watson Whitaker article is going to give us information about how the bird data was collected. So when our team went into Belize to collect the data for our Excel spreadsheet, okay, we collected it using the point count method as well as the McKinnon method. But you need to understand what is the McKinnon method. You need to understand what the point count method is. So that's where that article comes in. So it's not exactly, the article didn't take place in Belize, but it took place in Ecuador and Madagascar. But the methods that they use to collect the data are the same. So you're going to learn about these 2 methods, and then when we compose our methods section in our milestone, you're going to use that information to kind of summarize how you collected your data in Belize. Okay, so you'll want to open up that link. I have it up here. When you open it up, you get all this information that doesn't make sense. You're going to want to download the full text. So you'll just click on this PDF full text, and then open it up. By the way, you need to be signed into SNHU in order to utilize this particular library source. Okay, so you as a student have access to this. So you can kind of read through the abstract, but mainly you want to look at this field methods area. Okay, so you can see here that it lists some of the information about how what the Buchanan list is all about, so and what the point count is all about. So read through particularly these field methods, and you're going to use that to describe how we collected the point count data, for example. So point count stations in both of our study areas had a radius of 25 meters. Ours was a little less, it was only 15 meters. And we're located at least 100 meters apart, okay? 10 minutes were spent at each station, allowing identification for all the birds. So it's a time study, okay? So you can kind of use this and translate it into our own particular Belize with our 4-site study. Information about the Buchanan method is also in here somewhere. There it is. I don't know. I haven't looked at this in a while, so. Oh, here it is. It's up here. So it's both of them are under. It's only a couple paragraphs within under that field methods section that you'll need. Okay. So that you will definitely utilize. All right. So we've gone through kind of where everything is located. So let's talk about what you need to include. All right, let's go back. Swap. Okay. So you're going to include in your Milestone 1 paper a title, the introduction, and the methods section. Now your guidelines in your Milestone 1 rubric and guidelines information says 2 pages max for both of these. I'm not going to be, looking at how many pages you include. So if it's more than 2 pages, less than 2 pages is fine, okay? Most likely the introduction will be, I would say, maybe 3 paragraphs, 2 paragraphs, and then the methods section I usually do in 3 paragraphs, okay? So if you include the image of the map or something like that, it might end up more than 4 pages here, and that's fine. I'm not going to be too picky about that. And then you'll also need to include the title. Some general ideas of how to format your papers, since this is kind of the typical type of paper you do in a science class on SNHU. When you do a scientific paper, you want to have your main section headlines, which will be the introduction, the methods, the results, the discussion. So for this milestone, the introduction, the methods, those will be fully capitalized. So introduction, fully capitalized and centered. Okay, so when you write up your paper, it'll be in the center, introduction. Okay, and then I always like to include subheadings to keep everything organized. And I'll go over what those subheadings should be. So the subheadings, you'll want to, when you list the heading, the subheading, you only capitalize the first letter, not the whole thing. Okay, so just the first letter of the subheading will be capitalized, and then it'll be on the left, not in the center like the section heading. And you'll either want it to be bold and italicized like this, or underlined like that. Either way is appropriate. When you're writing your paper, when you have your introduction section that's labeled in the middle, you'll start in paragraph format right after, okay? Everything needs to be double-spaced in 12-point font. And typically we use Times New Roman, but if there's something similar to that, it doesn't matter, okay? All right, so you're gonna be graded on the introduction. Now, the introduction includes the title. So the title of your paper, this is your final project, right? So we're just doing sections of your final project. So the title of this milestone submission will not be Milestone 1, okay? It's going to be the project title. So you're going to come up with some sort of project title. Now remember, this is we're going to basically recommend a site for bird conservation. So your title needs to be descriptive. It should be about, I don't know, a sentence long. I mean, look at we go back to our scientific article that we were looking at. This is the entire title of this article: Rapid Assessment and Conservation Research, a critical critique of avifaunal assessment techniques is illustrated. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it's a pretty long title. You're going to do something similar to this. It's going to be descriptive. All right. So what do I mean? Well, I like to include what the experiment is on. So, for example, we're doing a survey of all 4 sites in Belize, and the purpose in order for bird conservation, or to choose recommend a site for conservation. So it should give the reader an idea of exactly what the article is about. So if it just says bird conservation, well, we don't really know what that article is about. It could be about anything. But if we're looking at choosing 4 sites within Belize in order to preserve one for a bird sanctuary, okay, that's a lot more specific. Then you know exactly what that paper is about. So a descriptive title is required for your milestone. Next, we have the introduction section. So the introduction section, I like to break it up into 3 points. So when you write an introduction in like an English paper or something like that, it kind of introduces the reader into what you're writing about. Well, the same in a scientific paper. Okay, so in this case, we're describing the what. So what are we doing? How to, what are we looking at? How are we collecting the data, and why? Okay, so that you kind of want to have that in the back of your mind when you are writing your intro. So let's start with what. So the what of that would be basically, what's the goal of the project from our company perspective? So what are we doing, and why are we doing it? Okay, what's this whole paper about? So you'll want to reference that this is that your job, what you are doing, the purpose of this paper is to basically, figure out which one of 4 possible sites you would recommend for the acquisition and preservation for bird conservation. So when you're writing, that little blob, blurb, whatever you want to call it, you want to identify all 4 sites by name. So, we are in the country of Belize, and we are tasked with, we were hired by the, choose whatever, Audubon Society of Belize to to survey 4 possible sites for a bird sanctuary. These 4 sites are located throughout the country of Belize. One of them is Gallon Jug, another one is Punta Gotra, and so forth. Okay, so you're telling us what the goal of the paper is. What's the goal of this project? Feel free to include a map if you want. I showed you where it was. Okay. Next, in your introduction, it's a good idea to describe what you're doing. Okay, so how are you going to make up your mind? So that includes the data collection. So what do we need to find out to help us determine which site to preserve? How did we actually collect the information? Now, you're not writing your method section in your introduction, so we're just basically going to include a little blurb about the type of data that we collected. So you might want to mention that, of each of the 4 sites, we collected field data on the regional scale as well as the specific parcel scale. And that data included basically looking at the bird species occurrence as well as the abundance of the bird species. We also described the plant communities. So that's the type of data that we used, and then we're using this data to come up with a final recommendation. Okay, so using that particular data, we will determine which of the 4 we think is best suitable for a bird sanctuary. So you'll want to include your reasoning or basically what you're looking for in your final recommendation. So why does the data that we're planning on collecting help us determine the size? So what are we looking for? We're looking for, oops, I misspelled that, biodiversity. So we're looking at not only plant diversity, okay, because that's going to give us enough variety of food sources for an abundance of bird species, right? So we're overall looking at the biodiversity. So in this section of your introduction, you're going to want to come up with, what's your final decision going to be based on? Are you going to choose the sites that's the least diverse? Probably not the smartest choice. Or are you going to choose the site that's the most diverse? What if it's diverse in plant communities but not so much in bird species? What if one site is really diverse in bird species but there's one particular bird that is very dominant, so there's very few of other individuals? What if one site has a lot of bird diversity but maybe the surrounding area is not so good? So you want to, before you actually analyze the data, think about what you would look for. Do you want a site that is abundant in birds and plants? Do you want, what are you looking for in your final decision? Okay, so that all should be in your introduction. So again, 2 to 3 paragraphs. So you have the what are we doing, how are we doing it, and why will this tell us which site we want, okay? The next thing that you're going to be doing is the method section. So this method section is, again, it's going to be a little tricky because you haven't analyzed the data yet, so it's hard for you to understand what we're actually doing. So, but we need to figure out generally what's going on. So when you're writing a method section, the method section should be, you should give enough detail that somebody could take the information that you've written and conduct a similar study and get similar results. Okay, so it needs to be pretty detailed. Since you have already collected the data and already analyzed it, okay, past tense, because we've, this is part of our final project. Everything should be in past tense for the method section since you already did it, okay? You already collected the data. So you're just presenting that method now for the reader. I highly recommend that you take your method section and divide it into subheadings. So remember those subheadings? You'll have the method section capitalized in the center, and then you'll have the little subheadings on the left-hand side that just kind of separates things, and it makes it a little bit more organized. So your subheadings can include these 3 titles. And by the way, why is it these 3 titles? If we go to our rubric, you can see here's our method section. It says we need to have complete, clear, accurate descriptions provided of the locations, sites, methods of data collection, and basic analysis techniques. So that's basically our 3 sections right there, okay? Our locations, our data collection methods, and our analysis techniques. So that's why I have it like that, okay? So let's look at the first subheading, study sites. So in the study sites, you're going to be giving clear, complete and accurate descriptions of our 4 study sites in Belize. There, we've given you in the final project guidelines the GPS locations, or I should say GIS locations, okay? So here's our final project guidelines. And in the prompt, here it says 15-meter diameter centered at Belmopan is 17.146 degrees north, latitude 88.72. Okay, so you'll need to include that in your studies site's information. So you're describing the site. So Belmopan is located at this basically location, I should say. Okay. And then give a brief description of what Belmopan looks like. So in order to do that, you can use the map. Okay, so here's Belmont. We see that it is kind of right in the center of Belize. It's close to a mountain range. It's right along the river, you know, so give some of these descriptions. You can estimate the elevation using the legend here. And then you can also just give a very broad overview of the types of vegetation, okay? So you can look at the vegetation analysis and just, you know, kind of see from a glance. It's like, oh, down here it says there's a lot of broadleaf forest or something like that. But you don't need to give any specific details because we're going to include those in the results section. All right, so get the GIS locations, where it's located within Belize, and then maybe just reference the vegetation communities. Okay, so this will give us an idea of where it's located and just kind of, you know, in our minds what it looks like. So that's the study sites. Should take you about a paragraph to do that. The next is the data collection methods. Now remember, we have basically 3 data sets. We have 2 that are related to birds, and then we have 1 that's related to plants. The 2 bird surveys that we conducted, one was those point count methods, and then the other was that McKinnon method. Both of those methods are described in the ODEA article that I showed you. Okay, so use that to help you, you know, write what how the bird data was collected. And then the plant data, you'll want to basically look at the vegetation analysis to figure out where that data came from. So let me show you real quick. Okay, so read this blurb up here, and you'll notice we actually didn't collect any of the data for the plant diversity. We based it on a GIS analysis provided by Merman. And you can actually go to the Merman site if you want to take a closer look at it. So we're basically using somebody else's data for that. Okay, so you want to mention that in our methods section. We did not collect this data, but you need to give the reader you know, where that data came from. You don't want to take credit for Merman's work. We didn't collect that data, so you got to give credit to Merman for that particular data. All right, so that'll take about another paragraph because you're describing the 3 data sets. And then finally, the last is how we analyze the data. So that will be the basic analysis techniques. So for the first one, the McKinnon method, you can take a look at the ODEA article. It kind of gives you a brief overview. Also the McKinnon method instructions, which you can look at, which we'll be doing in 2 weeks for analyzing that data in our module 2. And then just kind of glance at the bird data. So this will give you an idea of, you know, how we analyzed it. Basically, I can tell you right now, here's our McKinnon data. We used Excel, so notice this is Excel. And we're going to be creating this, what's called a species accumulation curve. So this is what we're ending up with in our milestone 2. It won't look exactly like this, but we're going to end up with this graph that has all 4 sites, and we're looking at the number of species accumulated through each of the surveys. So number of species that were found in each of the surveys added together. So that gives us our total number of species found. So read about that in the McKinnon methods and so forth. For the point count method, as I mentioned before, we uploaded the data from Excel into the past software. So that's under the diversity indices. So we uploaded it into the software program in order to calculate the number of species, number of individuals, the dominance Shannon index, and the J index for diversity. Okay, so it doesn't need to be very specific. You don't need to include any formulas or anything like that because we didn't use any formulas. We just shoved it into a software program and let the math work itself out in that coding for that program. Okay. And that's it for the method section. So we have it in our 3 forms. So you'll have those 3 subheadings, preferably. Study sites will be about a paragraph, data collection methods will be another paragraph, and then analysis will be another. Okay? Even though it's not required, I do suggest that you start a reference section, mainly because let's keep everything the same so that when we put it all together at the end, you'll have everything there. So the reference section will include what references you used for this particular milestone. So as far as your references, you'll definitely have that Odea et al. Article, okay, because that one you used to help figure out how to collect the data. And then you'll also want to reference the Merman site, because that's where we got the GIS data for the, or GPS data for the plant diversity. So we got to give credit to that site. Okay, so you'll definitely want to include the Odea article as well as the Merman in your reference section. Okay, if you do choose to include this in your milestone 1, I'm not going to grade it. It's not worth any points, but I can give you feedback on it. So I can make sure that it's in the correct, if it looks correct. So this will be in APA format. Okay. So last thing that you want, just some last thoughts before I let you go. Read the rubric before you submit. So once you've kind of written up your milestone 1, double check with the rubric, make sure you didn't forget anything. I always have every single term multiple students, not just one, but multiple students who don't read the rubric and then they leave out the title, or their title is just milestone 1. So that then it's like, okay, well, I can't give you exemplary, I can't give you proficient, I have to give you needs improvement, okay, for that particular area. So read, make sure you didn't leave anything out, okay, make sure you didn't include, you included the software that was used for analyzing the data and so forth. Okay. Always proofread your work. So luckily our Word programs do it for us. Read things, give it to somebody to read, just check your grammar if you need to, just so that I can concentrate on the content of your work, not your writing skills. Okay, I'm not an English professor. I'm a biology professor or an ecology professor. Post questions in the general question discussion board as you go along. So if you are confused about, like, what the point count method is, or where did you get information on that, just post it in the general questions discussion board so we can all help you. And when in doubt, ask for help. So I'm always helpful with giving you direction on where to go. If you're stuck, if you don't understand what to put, you can send me a rough draft if you want of like the introduction and say, am I on the right track? And I can give you feedback as long as you don't do it like the night before it's due. Okay, so feel free to reach out. I'm always there to help you. All right, so good luck, and I can't wait to read your milestone 1.